It's 2 a.m. You are lying perfectly still in the dark, but mentally you aren't in bed at all. The sheets feel heavy. The silence in the room is absolute, but the noise in your head is deafening. You are sitting alone in a windowless, freezing editing suite. On the glowing monitors in front of you is a 3-minute, completely mundane interaction you had at a coffee shop 9 hours ago. You are scrubbing through it, frame by frame. You zoom in on a slight pause before you spoke. You rewind the tape to analyze the exact pitch of your voice. You are applying dramatic horror movie color grading to a completely harmless goodbye, turning a casual wave into a cinematic disaster. I think we've all been trapped in this room. You feel like your mind is fundamentally broken because you cannot stop replaying the tape. You want to sleep, but the editor inside your head refuses to power down the screens. But what if you aren't socially broken? What if you are just trapped in a literal state of mental post-production? It's a Wednesday, late afternoon. You're standing by the elevator. A coworker makes a mild, passing joke about the weekend. You laugh maybe a fraction of a second too late and say something generic back. The doors open. You walk in. You press the button for your floor. There's a sudden, sharp heat creeping up the back of your neck. There is something tight right in the middle of your chest. You didn't do anything explicitly wrong, but the cameras are rolling and the footage has already been sent to the lab. Psychologists have a clinical term for this quiet, invisible exhaustion. They call it post-event processing. What I keep seeing is that the brain takes raw, unscripted daily interactions and ruthlessly edits them into a psychological thriller in the middle of the night. It scans every pixel of the memory, searching for continuity errors in your social mask. There is something I came across recently about how the brain actually handles this kind of social awkwardness. It involves a specific region called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or the DACC. What the evidence suggests is that this area of the brain processes perceived social missteps using the exact same neural pathways as physical injury, which might explain why remembering an awkward wave from 3 years ago makes you physically wince in the present. It makes you want to crawl out of your own skin just to escape the memory. The excruciating, full-body cringe you feel in the dark isn't a metaphor. Your brain is injecting actual, physical pain signals into the memory's timeline to force you to pay attention to a perceived mistake. You drop a heavy glass on your foot, you get bruised. You say the wrong thing to a barista, your brain registers a burn. How are you supposed to rest when your nervous system firmly believes you are bleeding out from a conversational paper cut? It's almost always a Tuesday or Wednesday interaction, too. Nothing high stakes, just an ordinary Tuesday. To understand why the editing bay won't simply shut down, we have to look at the original studio mandate. Research tends to indicate that the brain isn't torturing you for its own amusement. It is acting on an outdated, primitive survival script. In our ancestral environment, a bad social performance didn't just mean a slightly awkward lunch in the break room. It meant being written off the show entirely. It meant exile from the tribe. And in the wild, exile meant death. So this midnight rumination is actually a desperate, primitive attempt to keep you safe from tribal cancellation. It wants to figure out exactly what went wrong so you never, ever repeat the mistake. But here is the heavy cost of keeping the studio open. You start anticipating the brutal edits before the interaction even ends. You are having the conversation, and you are watching yourself have the conversation simultaneously. You become a hostage to your own hyperawareness, constantly adjusting your tone, your posture, and your facial expressions to avoid any future scrutiny. You begin to curate your personality in real time, holding back your natural reactions, just to give the 2 a.m. editor less footage to scrutinize. And then you just nod, smile, and say, "Sounds good." Which brings us back to the editing suite and the realization that changes everything. You look at people who never overthink, people who just speak their minds and move on without a second thought, and you assume they are healthier. You assume they have it all figured out, but actually, maybe that's not the whole picture. The part I keep returning to is that those people aren't necessarily better at socializing. They are just shooting on cheap, low-resolution equipment. They don't capture the subtle micro-expressions. They don't record the slight shifts in tone or the hidden tension in a room. If you are agonizing in the editing bay, it is undeniable proof of what researchers call high self-monitoring. You aren't fundamentally flawed. You possess elite cognitive functioning and IMAX-level empathy. You notice everything. You feel everything. Your mental software is highly capable. It is simply rendering in 8K. The pain of overthinking isn't a symptom of a weak mind. It is the heavy byproduct of a profoundly observant one that hasn't learned how to clock out for the day. You cannot stop the cameras from rolling during the day. Your brain is built to record the world in high definition, and that is a quiet kind of superpower. But you do have to learn how to walk out of the editing bay at night. You have to lock the door. When the loop starts playing at 2 a.m., the instinct is to lie there and argue with the footage. But arguing just creates more footage. Instead, you have to force a hard system reset. You get out of bed. You walk to the kitchen. You drink a glass of ice-cold water. You change the physical temperature of the machine to short-circuit the biological loop. Then you use a subtitle track. You write down the absolute worst-case scenario of that interaction. You force the vague, shadowy anxiety into the harsh light of reality. You put it on paper to expose the complete irrationality of the fear. You look at the words, you lock the picture, and you refuse to do another take. Sit with it for longer than feels comfortable. That's the whole ask. Because the raw footage is never going to be perfect. There will always be a slight pause, a weird laugh, a sentence that didn't land exactly the way you intended. The question is whether you are willing to let the credits roll on a flawed performance, or if you're going to sit in the dark forever, trying to edit a past you can no longer touch. The screen is already black.